Hi, Renier, and welcome to the Tea with Nicky. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just to kick things off, I want to ask you if you can introduce yourself, how you'd want to be introduced on the podcast.
Yeah, sure. Hello, Nicky. So my name's Renier. I have been a founder or an entrepreneur ever since coming out of varsity. I started my first business, which was a software business called 4i. We were some of the first people to build mobile apps in South Africa. So we built apps for everybody that had an app idea, back when the App Store launched in iOS 2.3, which is a long time ago. And consequently, we also started building apps for big brands. So learned a lot working with big corporates, building digital products for them. Learned a lot building products for startups, and through that, I've developed a love for helping early stage founders. About 2 years ago, I started consulting quite a few early stage founders, helping them make progress, helping them with strategy, marketing, positioning, product, a bit of everything. And then also got involved with a company that's very similar to the one I built called Specno. So spending quite a lot of
Mm.
time there, leading the revenue operations for the Specno team, helping them grow their revenue and their positioning in the market, and also leading the sales team. And then also started the entrepreneur in me couldn't not build something. I've tried the agency game once, building 4i, and so started a tech trends newsletter called the Open Letter about a year ago now. The 1st of November would be a year. And yeah, that's been going well. We've got a few thousand subscribers. And we also have our own podcast, which is for builders called How Would You Build It? Which Bobby and I do. And we've been having a lot of fun meeting amazing people along the journey. And yeah, so the big plans for building that out is like a audience for now, but eventually a community of startup founders and people working with startups in innovation, in tech, collaborating, sharing ideas, and everything that goes around building great stuff in South Africa in the digital product space.
So you mentioned that you're also a startup founder yourself. You founded 4i, and now you help consult other startups to create their success, as well as now being the head of revenue operations at Specno. But what were your days like as an entrepreneur when you were running 4i?
Oh, well, I think the first thing is there's a massive benefit in starting a business when you're young because you're extremely naive, right? So you think how difficult can it be? Like,
Ignorance is bliss, right?
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So I was quite naive. We started in 2000 and we made a first sale. We started developing some software, and then this thing called recession hit in 2009, which a lot of young people still haven't experienced probably up until this moment. But one of the big traits of a recession, and it's really obvious, goes without saying, sales are slow, but not slow in the sense that you're not making sales. The same amount of inquiries come through, the same amount of people are interested in things. It's just the commitments are not happening. Like people are delaying, they're blue ticking you, they're not replying.
Yeah.
It feels like you're doing a tremendous amount of work without anything making any kind of progress. So that happened very early on, and it was a bit of a rude awakening to the world of entrepreneurship to start it straight in a recession. So sales was always a challenge in the early days. And then, I think what is very important for every entrepreneur is trying to figure out what is your way of selling. Like, I don't think there's one specific way. Like, I've read a lot of sales books, and a lot of times I'm like, this doesn't fit my personality or the way I do things. Like, it's really hard for me to sell this way that this person who was extremely successful in sales are trying to do it, right? But what happened in the 4i is through lots of trial and error and effort and putting ourselves out there, I realized that the way that I like to sell is through relationship, and really believing in the product, and then being really persuasive around the value, and then also making sure whatever value gets delivered along the line, I take responsibility for that. And
Mm.
that combination got us a bit of success. And I think the other thing that got us success is because we were willing to try everything. It was early stage. Someone asked us to build a mobile app, which was just happened to be at the beginning of a massive wave of people wanting to build apps. We did so. And the first one we did at a tremendous loss, but we learned lessons and we had something to show for it. And from there, more people asked, cool, can you help build us an app? And eventually some of the bigger brands came along, and we built all of their apps, which was a lot of fun. But that really helped. So it was this combination of really trying to figure out how to selling something unique, which there was a lot of demand for and very low supply. at the time, and yeah, just willing to take a stab on something, and also being very naive. I think it's quite an important quality in the early, or something that a young founder can harness and use to their advantage. Just try things.
So it sounds like being young and naive is a very good thing for a founder, for someone wanting to start their own business.
Yeah, it definitely is because yeah, I mean, building a business is extremely hard. It's the
Mm,
hardest thing you can possibly do professionally, and I think sometimes people, well, I think mostly people underestimate how complex it is because our frame of
yeah.
reference of what complexity is probably limited to the amount of complexity we've been exposed to before in our life or actually observed other people being involved with, right? So unless you've actually built a business, you have no appreciation or little appreciation of the intense complexity of making this work,
Mm,
right? The balance that constantly needs to play out, the pressure, the stress, and I think it's that for that reason, I think it's definitely not for everyone, which is completely fine, also. But it's also something that I think founders that are successful and manage to pull it off should be rewarded handsomely because it is extremely complicated. So, and I think the naivety, it helps in the young days. I think when you get older, you're less naive, but you're more experienced, right? So
mm,
instead of trying 50 things and 49 of them failing, if you're young and naive, that's the recipe to success. Just move
yeah.
quickly, do many things, and don't worry about it too much. Now that I'm older, I think deeper about things, and I won't try 50 things. I'll probably try 10, and 7 will fail. So I'll get 3 successes in the same amount of time. I just wouldn't have tried 50 things.
So, in your lessons of learning about failure, in a startup business, and also with your consulting, what are two key lessons that you've learned from your startup days and also working with startups?
Yeah, I think one of the things is uh, when there's a hype, like I mean, when we started, there was a mobile app. Like anybody wanted to build an app, you couldn't go to a Brian and say you work in software without someone going, "Hey, I've got an app right now." It it feels exactly like you can't go to a Brian without someone going, "Hey, have you used ChatGPT before? Or have you seen you can now use DALL-E 3 to create images, and I'm building a cartoon, I'm writing a novel, I'm integrating this into my product." Like everybody's talking about AI. And that's awesome, but there's obviously it was the same with Web3 and crypto 2, 3 years ago, right? So everybody's talking
Yeah.
about is, oh, you need this, and you need to go into DeFi, and you need to start, these decentralized apps are the future of banking and all of that stuff. And in all of these scenarios, like 90% plus is probably hype, right? Everybody just getting excited, right? And at
Yeah.
one point, the hype cycle reaches its peak, and then everybody starts looking at, but what is the real value here? And then majority of people go, oh, I actually don't need a mobile app. Oh, actually, we don't need these, decentralized applications on the blockchain. Or why do we even do this on a blockchain? Like, what is this? Why does this make sense? And AI is not there yet, but it's gonna get there. Like everybody
Mm.
and their dogs are implementing AI, and they're going and spending lots of money, and I don't think it's wasted money. It's less, it's just school fees. People are going to learn, wow, we can't use AI for this, or oh, it's actually not working the way we thought it would. So the hype cycles are very important to identify for two reasons. One, I think the one can capitalize on it. So if you go into AI, there's much more demand at the moment than supply. So specifically, if you're an agency or services business, you can pivot into that space as a massive opportunity. The second thing that disclaimer or warning I just want to add to it is being aware that this is a hype cycle, and at some point it's probably going to reach its top and crash. Okay, and that's something that happened to us in 4 eyes. So we were building native mobile apps, and we were going well, and we were looking at Cordova, and Microsoft had this. Couldn't even remember what it was, but these tools that you can write once and deploy to iOS and Android, right? And we never built on that. We built native apps. But then, React Native became mainstream, and we're like, it's just one of those things again. Little did we know, we were at the top of the cycle of native apps, right? So we didn't anticipate this thing to crash as soon as it did. And it didn't crash. It was just a pivot towards React Native, people asking more questions around what is value, a rise in the amount of mobile developers that are available. So all of this just meant that we rode this wave too long, right? And
Yeah.
anything about surfing, at one point you just get off the wave because there's no more momentum to take you forward, right? And that's really important. So these hype cycles, if you want to get into AI, understand it is a hype cycle. Understand, see how you can ride this wave to get maximum out of it. But know at one point it's probably going to die down. And I'm not saying AI is going to die. It's definitely not going to die. But AI is going to get to a point where people really look at, how, or really understand how do we apply this into our business, and those use cases will remain. But that's by far in a minority. So that's the first thing, and I think the other thing is, if you're going to be building AI, building AI stuff now, really get to the heart of what is the value to users here, because I think that's in every hype cycle I've seen, like that's what people miss. So even us, we were building apps, and to be honest, a lot of the apps we built, and like I actually those apps didn't really have a need for existence. Like I couldn't understand how users would actually use it. But, at the time, you caught up in this hype cycle and you keep building, keep building, keep building. But, looking back at it, you can see, oh, okay, a lot of those things actually, app maybe wasn't the best um, place for a user to engage with those kind of things. So I think that's a very important thing. And I think if I can add something, I mean, you asked lessons from failures. I think, to add onto the hype cycle, the most important thing in business, I think, is to make money and to know why you're making money. Like that's a good place to be, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the majority of businesses that I've engaged with either don't make money and they don't know why, which is also not a bad place to be because you can go, okay, cool. I need to continue to tinker and figure out how this thing can make money. But by far the most dangerous place to be, and I see a lot of businesses in this place, is they make a bit of money, but they don't really understand exactly why they're making money. And at some
Mm.
point, you're exposed to you can stop making money, and then you don't know what to fix. You don't know what to change. You don't know who to retrench. You don't know how to change the team. You don't know how to change direction. And an example of this is that's very relevant is in an hype cycle, right? So if you're building something in AI now, you can't keep up. You can't keep hiring enough people. You're implementing AI solutions for clients. Everybody's going, go, 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 build stuff. And then all of a sudden, everybody goes, well, is this really adding value to our business? And then, okay, they start canceling the contracts, and then you could find yourself in a difficult spot. But if you understood that the reason that you're making money is because this is a hype cycle, and people are throwing
Mm.
money at everything without necessarily understanding the value of this for them as a business, perhaps you'll be more or less aggressive in your hiring and growth strategy, understanding that at one point, the hype will die, and then you're in a good position. But if that why isn't clear, you could find yourself exposed when some of these cycles change, and or when the environment that you're operating in changes.
That reminds me a lot of have you read the book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why?
Yes.
So, would you suggest that many startup founders, entrepreneurs start with that book as well before launching a business? Coming back to the fundamentals of why are you doing this business? Why are you creating these products? And always having that as like a central theme in the business.
Yeah, I think Simon's book is awesome, and I recommend everybody to at least watch the talk. The famous talk, the TED talk, I believe, one of the first TED talks ever. I think that he put TED talks on the map by doing that talk on a whiteboard, or what is like a flipboard, writing
Yeah.
those circles, right? So I like the thinking of it, and his example also that he uses in that specific video is about Apple. It's a very good example because
Mm.
anybody that's used an Apple product could relate to that, and have this aha moment of going, yes, that makes sense. Practically, I've always really wrestled with the process of coming up with a why without really understanding the what and the how, right? So I think it's much more organic in the process of getting to a why than it is to start with a why. So my approach would much rather be, start with a problem that you think you would enjoy solving. Okay, so a
Ah.
lot of times people start businesses and they like the outcome of what it could be in terms of how they would be seen or perceived when they reach that outcome. Okay, so let me break that down. So some people say they want to be a startup founder. And if they're really honest, the only reason why they want to be a startup founder is they think once the startup is successful and they're wealthy and they are respected, they like that state of being. They like to be seen or thought of that,
Yeah.
right?
That status.
That status, really, right?
Mm.
And that's not really sustainable because that the way we think about ourselves, we sometimes discount it or change it, right? So we go, maybe I can't be the richest guy in my town, but I can. Fifth richest would probably be fine, right? So this is a moving goalpost, right? So if that is your motivation, you're constantly going to move the goalpost as things get difficult and complicated, right? So
Mm.
it's not a sustainable way to actually drive you to achieve anything. But what could be a sustainable way is actually saying, what I enjoy doing is I enjoy solving very specific problems, right? I enjoy figuring out how to do things, or I enjoy resolving conflict between team members, right? And this is beyond entrepreneurship. This is like career advice, I would say. Like find problems you love solving, right?
Mm.
And find a career that requires a lot of those kind of problem solving. Because you can't get away from solving problems. That's how we generate value. Problems getting solved generates value, and value, is pretty much money, and that's how we make money, even as employees. Like, I mean, we can get it to the most simplest of jobs. Like, I've got a problem, my garden is a mess. So I need someone to solve that, right? So if someone likes gardening, they can, come and solve that problem for me. They generate value and, they get paid for it. So instead of saying, cool, what is the status I want to achieve, or what am I thinking of? Try and find problems you like to solve. Once you find the problem
Mm.
you like solving, you can think of, is this potentially a startup, right? And then, coming back to the start with why, what starts happening is as you really engage with the problem and go, cool, how do we solve this? How do we, is it this way, that way? How do people want it solved? What do they want in the process of wanting it solved? When do they want it solved? So in this process, you really start figuring out the what and the how, but then eventually you go, this why almost comes to the surface without you having to stop with that why, right? And I think also a very meaningful why is I want to do complicated things, get it right, figure it out, make money in the process, have fun. And I think that's an awesome why. Like, not all of us are building Apple. Like, some of us just want to have fun, work, and earn money while doing it and move forward in life. Like, and I think that's a very, very respectable why.
Yeah. And speaking of starting with why, it kind of takes me to the next question of, finding your aha moment. But I'm curious to hear more about your tech newsletter. So, you said you started the open letter, which it's a newsletter that speaks about technology, startups, businesses. So what was your aha moment to make you decide to start the open letter?
I think it was a combination of stuff. I signed up for Sam Parr is a guy who started a tech newsletter in the US, I think 2, 3 years ago, called The Hustle. And if you're not signed up for The Hustle, I can recommend it. It's quite cool. And it's a daily newsletter where they don't speak about like, oh, Apple is launching a new product. Like, that's not what they talk about. They'll go, the reason why Apple will pursue a specific technology is probably because this, and this, right? So, and that I found interesting because Apple building a product is a bit so what for me. It's like I read that
Mm.
headline when I scroll on Twitter, but someone really unpacking to me that, why is mixed reality the future frontier of computing, right? Like,
Mm.
just raising some of those points. It almost feels like, wow, I'm sitting in this meeting of strategists at Apple exploring, where's the next opportunity for us as a business. Now, as a founder myself and someone who works with founders, I found those kind of thought-provoking insights really exciting. Like, I thought, wow, it stimulates my thinking. It gives me peripheral ideas. And I don't know, I think it works like this for most people, but ideas stimulate ideas, right? So if you and I, if you pitch an idea to me, right, you're almost asking me to critically think about it. And if I do,
Mm.
other ideas spark up, and then all of a sudden we might have a completely different idea that has nothing to do with it. So I really enjoyed reading the Hustle. I also saw in South Africa that there's nothing like that, and all the tech journalism. I mean, we've got great tech reporting. We just don't have a lot of people deep diving into why things why are people investing in certain businesses? Why do some startups work and others don't? Like, what is the why actually of why certain
Yeah.
work?
See, it
And
starts with why.
it's worth the what. So I was thinking about how can we build a something similar to the hustle, or even Morning Brew for that matter. Morning Brew is another popular American-based daily newsletter. Something similar to that, but with a South African focus, like
Mm,
specifically South Africa, perhaps later Africa. The reality is I'm not operating in Africa at the moment, so I don't get exposure to startups outside of South Africa. So it's a bit hard to get insights and learning. So we started specifically focusing on South Africa. And yeah, we said, cool, let's try this out, put it together a year ago. I'm not a writer by background. The beautiful thing about writing is the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And somehow people think it gets better. For me, it feels like I'm still writing the same, but people say it's getting better. So that's a good thing. And yeah, we've been doing the aha moment was really just going, I think there's an opportunity here because no one's doing it. And I can
mm,
see how much I'm enjoying the content from America. I just wish it was more relevant to the space I'm operating in myself.
yeah.
And that's really where it came from.
Yeah. I think a little tip for you to see about your writing is look at the first newsletter that you sent and look at the last one, and then I'm sure you'll see vast improvements and differences in
Because
that.
it's like that thing, you never watch yourself on a video, like you never read your
Yeah.
own writing.
Yeah, that's true. I can read what I've written, but watching myself back sometimes I cringe a little
It is
bit, but then
cringeworthy.
you
Really
have to
useful,
push through. Yeah.
but cringeworthy.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack to what you were talking about earlier. Making sure that you not just following a hype or a trend and not getting caught up in that because eventually those trends die down. And
Mm.
you've mentioned quite a lot about AI. So what are your thoughts on the current AI trend? And is there another new tech that's on the horizon that you think might be a new trend afterwards or come into being a trend now as well?
Yeah, I think we're going to see different iterations, versions, applications of AI now for the foreseeable future. Like it's a big topic. I think something which a lot of people don't appreciate is the amount of electricity and water for cooling these systems need and processing power in order to keep them running. Like um it's
No,
it's
I don't
getting
think anyone knows.
it's getting bankrolled at the moment by Microsoft and big tech and all of these guys. I mean they're not making money as far as I understand. So the question of how this would become economically viable remains unanswered. I think because of what people have seen, it's captured the imagination of everyone. I mean, let's be honest.
Mm.
Like the first time we all engaged with ChatGPT, it was pretty impressive. Like it is.
It is.
After a while,
Yeah.
you figure out it lies a bit and it's a bit stupid. It's really irritating how it apologizes. So you see those things in time, but it is definitely it is quite impressive. And I mean, to think it's not even been out that long. I think it's about
Mm.
now. So it's really impressive, and I think it captured the imagination, and people jumped on a bandwagon and started building things, and which is awesome. Uh, uh, but hopefully the technology would catch up to a level that it becomes economically viable, and I think it would. I think there's enough investment going into this to figure it out. It is an extremely complicated thing, and there's so much content on this. We don't have to dive into it too much, but I mean, just the whole music industry. Like, I
Mm.
honestly don't know what they're gonna do.
Yes.
Like,
With the
I mean,
voice, yeah.
Drake's voice is on every single song ever now. Like, I don't know, poor Drake. They've picked Drake on every to make music with. I don't. It's really hard to distinguish. Yeah, I'm sure a pure fan would be able to recognize the difference, but I don't recognize the difference. To me, it sounds the same. So that's really tough. But what I do think is going to happen is we're almost going to see a resurgence, and it's the same with movies, right? So if you can imagine
Mm.
like just AI generated movies of every single actor in the world ever. Like, why do they need actors anymore? But what's going to happen is there's probably going to be a rise in demand for live performance. So I'm thinking
Mm.
we might see a rise in theater. We might see a rise in live music performance. So instead of you know, Taylor Swift going, "Here's my album on iTunes." She goes, "I'm gonna put out songs only on live performances. You can only come and see them in person." right? Which I think
Mm.
is we're not far from people doing that. You know, the only
Yeah.
place you can hear this music is if you come listen to it live, and you know, with
Yeah.
all the ticket prices. And there's almost like some of these futuristic movies, if you think about it, is there's this always this sadness of humans going, "Oh, I miss the human stuff, right? I miss the real
Yeah.
authentic stuff." Um, and that's what I'm thinking about. It's like we're gonna develop a longing for real human connection, real human interaction, real human experiences, for that matter, created by humans.
Yeah.
Because that's really what AI is doing. Like it's commoditizing some of the basic functions humans used to do in the past, right? So you know, get someone to do admin for you. Well, now you can get a bot to do it for you, right? So now we've raised the bar of this, and now we go, okay, well, what's left for humans if those things are not going to bring meaning and positive contribution to the things we're involved with? Well, what's the next frontier? It's like, well, connection, relationship, um, you know, craft, appreciating craft.
Mm.
And we
Yeah.
kind of seen some of that, by the way, if I can get a bit philosophical, but you kind of see that in the whole
Mm.
craft movement, right? So craft beer, like why is craft beer a big deal?
Yeah.
Like it's because people go, you know what, SAB has mass manufactured beer and it all tastes the same. Like and now people go, okay, this guy, which I know really has a passion for making a great beer, you know, and crafting it, I want to support this guy. And we see it in all kinds of things. It's happening in coffee. It's happening in, you know, in food. Like we see this resurgence of people having appreciation for human beings putting effort to make something beautiful, tasty, wonderful, create an experience that's meaningful. So I'm thinking we'll see more of that going forward as all of the old human stuff gets more commoditized.
Do you think that'll free up a lot of our time as people as well to be more social then? Because there's also the scares of, the metaverse being incorporated into the workspace, making people lazier, people not going to leave
Yeah,
their homes. And obviously with technology, we're more connected, but less socially so. I mean, you go out for lunch or dinner, you see people sitting there scrolling on their phones. So I
yeah.
know that that's also humans, that are they going to have more time available to them? Or
So
are things
I
just
think
going to be more pressurized because now you have AI to help you? So how can you not do things more efficiently?
look, with any technology, there's a good and a bad side. It's just unfortunately most of the times the bad sides just tend to dominate the good that it brings, right? You know, we speak about people being less connected than ever before. It's weird because we have this technology that really helps us connect better than ever before. So how did this happen, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the root of it all, it's this weird dichotomy that we're trying to make our lives as comfortable and convenient as possible, right? So why do I want to do something if AI can do it for me? Okay, but on the other side, we really get fulfillment and meaning out of work, specifically hard work that results in positive results, creating value and then earning money, right? Now, for anyone who hasn't really experienced that, I don't believe that to be true because everybody thinks, well, how can it be fun to work hard, right? Okay, because it's hard work, it's difficult, it's complicated, it
Mm.
makes you tired, right? But you know, inherently, like that is the biggest progress we've seen in humanity is whenever people put in hard work, right? And there's a lot of
Mm.
fulfillment in that. So for this to free up time for us to sit around and lounge and have community, I don't think that's going to be practical. But I do think the people that realize that, look, the object of life isn't to stop working. That isn't the objective of life. The objective of life is to attempt meaningful things, get it right, complicated meaningful things, get it right, you know, and get a sense of fulfillment out of doing that, right? Now that functions within communities, societies, families. I mean, I'm talking specifically about work, but even in our families, like you know,
Mm.
being a dad is sometimes a complicated task, right? But
Yes.
going through, you know, the effort and the sacrifice of doing that well, and the work to do that well, and getting good feedback from people as your children grow up, you know, that your children are becoming adults that are positively contributing to the world, you know, that brings a sense of fulfillment, right? But that's work, right? So the
Yeah.
essence of all of this that brings fulfillment for us is work and effort and sacrifice, right? And
Hmm.
that's why you know this big movement of AI doing all the work, and you know we did a piece once on universal basic income, and you know how people are trying to build things that machines generate value, and the value that machines generate go into a pool, and that money gets distributed to all the humans ever, and none of us ever had to work. That for me sounds like a way for people to get really unhappy, for
Mm.
someone else to have all the control over someone. Like it's work is a good thing, and you
Yeah.
see that in people that are working hard, getting results. They enjoy it, and they enjoy the contributions they make, and I think that's what's important in all of this. Is like AI shouldn't take our jobs. AI should just lift the bar of what
Enhance.
we can
Yeah.
accomplish. Like, you know,
Yeah.
the complex things we could have achieved before AI, is now stuff that is quite easily achievable in some cases, which now means the complex stuff we need to continue to do is, beyond that point, which I think
Mm.
is the way to look at it. So it's not, let's not stop working. Let's just go for bigger dreams, bigger goals, bigger ideals.
Yeah, just one more question as well before we move on from this, because I do find the AI topic very fascinating. I mean, I use ChatGPT myself for the podcast to help me, and I fully believe that AI was created so that it can help. We work with it. It's not to take
Yeah,
jobs; it's to help us, enhance us. We work with the technology, but there's also been a big rise in movement, like you're saying. You always see sort of all the bad sides of a new trend. So with AI, it it's a very powerful tool that can also very easily become quite a dangerous tool to use in society as well. You see the likes of Elon Musk going to Congress and appealing, for there to be restrictions, to be laws put in place as well to just contain AI because it can very easily be weaponized. What are your thoughts about, putting laws on AI and restricting it?
sure. It's a complicated thing because I mean, whenever you put a law in place, you pretty much move the power from whoever built something to a politician, right? And in some cases, that's not a good idea anyway. It's like, you're just shifting it to someone who actually doesn't understand the technology and could probably use it for other gains, right? And I'm generalizing a bit. I'm not saying there aren't politicians that aren't good, but generally, if we look at history, mostly that's how it's gone down. Um, in terms of regulating it, the problem is the technology's moved way too fast. Like, I mean, regulating it
Mm,
now, it's like, well, you know, I wouldn't even know where to start. We've got every single industry being influenced by this in such a significant way. We haven't actually dealt with the issues of how we got to this place. I mean, um, a lot of these models have used data that, or that was available on the internet, but the data that they've used, they did so by breaking the license agreements of those platforms that made the data available, right? So I
mm,
don't even think I think some of those cases are starting to come up now, but I mean, it's almost as if it moved too fast, right?
yeah.
So regulating it, I think there is a level of regulation absolutely necessary. And you know what? I think a great example of how technology moved way too fast for a regulation is how unusable the internet have become because of cookie things. Like every website you hit, do you want to use cookies? And the freaking X or deny or whatever button is always in a different place. Like I mean, it's the worst user experience ever, right? And what happened? Like no one regulated how the internet's getting used and how personal information is getting shared,
Mm,
etc. So, these companies went ahead and built these things, and now we have to regulate it afterwards. And now it's just the worst experience ever. It's like, it's just, my opinion, it's almost breaking the internet for me. It's just
yeah.
delay. It's so annoying. It's the most annoying thing about the internet. And yet, I do understand the benefits of that, right? I do understand that
Mm,
the regulation resulted in this isn't necessarily a bad thing for me as an individual. It's just such a prohibitive thing for using this tool, which is the internet. And I think AI might end
mm,
up the same way. Imagine asking AI a question, and before it gives you an answer, it gives you like 50 prompts of accept, accept, accept. In a similar way, we're doing with cookies because you now have to accept all of these things in order to just get a simple answer out of the thing. Then I'm like, well, I'm not
mm,
sure if this is useful anymore for me. Like for what it was designed for, this is just the user experience is just too bad. So unfortunately, regulation will probably do that. Unfortunately, regulation is probably required. But I'd love to see a movement of people in industries going, you know what? Let's not fight this thing and say block it, ban it, poison it, whatever. I know that
Yeah.
artists are busy poisoning AI, which is fascinating. Which is just a way of trying to trick it to not be able to do what the artists do and copy them. Which is like, are we in World War IV already? Like, what's happening? Are we fighting machines now? Like, we're poisoning machines with
Yeah.
false data. It's just insane. This is the stuff sci-fi movies are made of. But anyway, industry is really going, you know what, it is what it is. Like, let's figure out how our industry needs to change into a world where these things are a reality. And I mean,
Mm.
an example of that would be, like I said earlier, like music artists just going, cool, I'm doing songs only live. I'll perform more. You're going to work harder. You're going to do more shows. But if
Yeah.
that's what it takes in the future to be in the space and that's what you love doing, well, that's how the landscape's changed.
Yeah. Well, just last thing before we move on. Sorry, I feel like I keep saying that. But you saying now is, what are we in World War IV now that we're fighting machines? I think I agree as well. It needs to be regulated. And I think it's just maybe contextually where it gets regulated because, I mean, we've seen the news articles where there was those drones that had AI, artificial intelligence, and they actually shot down a tower that was giving it instruction. They were doing a drone testing and it actually killed one of the soldiers in the tower as well. So I think it's just to avoid, like maybe when it comes to military using AI, there should be regulations because it's something that can very easily be weaponized, and then we are going to find ourselves in a World War IV fighting machines because they override the code because they were built for one sole purpose, and
Mm.
you're now blocking them for fulfilling that purpose.
Mm. Yeah, and I think probably the most scary immediate place is, if we think about scammers and con artists that try and get into your internet bank. I mean,
And
for
fake
them,
news.
but for scammers specifically, it's a numbers
Mm,
game, right? So if I attempt 10,000 people, I'll probably get one person to be stupid enough to fall for my scam. Okay. So if they can now use AI to do 10,000 a day, imagine how many people are they going to scam.
yeah,
So, and we've seen some of these reports coming up, robo voices, phoning, doing phone calls, doing checks, like all these things. So that I think is something that's going to be is we'll see a lot of that coming up in the next.
yeah,
Wow, it's so even something as basic. I mean, those spam emails we all used to get, right? I mean, the spelling is so bad and that thing. I'm going, there's no way a bank emailed this thing to me. Now they can use ChatGPT to create that email, right? They can
Mm,
very convincing email. Now, I know it sounds simple because a lot of people still check the email address or whatever, but I received the email a few days ago, which I thought like this definitely looks legit, and then I checked the email sender. I'm like, okay, it's not legit. But because of these tools, like people that are not proficient in the English language can now, be very proficient and
yeah.
be much more effective at that. How do you regulate that? No idea. Maybe we should just spam marketing, block marketing calls altogether. Like it's become completely illegal for anybody to phone anyone about anything. That could be fun.
Oh, I would not mind not getting those marketing calls. It's like, hey, so we have a funeral plan. Do you want to hear about it? No, thank you, I do not.
And somehow, I don't know what you know what's a big problem? We don't have enough people in South Africa for them to call because it takes them about 2 weeks to get back to phoning me again. Like they phoned, it seems like they phone 62 million people every 2 weeks because every 2 weeks, 10 people phone me. I'm like, it's incredible. It's like no one wants to buy your
You
stuff.
just
Just starting from the top again, phoning everyone. So
just got to think, where's your information leaked publicly that they keep calling you?
it's probably where you fill them in a security complex, that number. I really don't know why they need my mobile number. Probably for them to sell it to someone.
Yeah, 100%. So moving on from this topic, I just wanted to ask, backtracking to, the conversations about startups, founders, and the open letter as well. But in your career, what has been a business blunder that turned into a blessing?
Sure, a blessing. I'm actually building a business. So, I mentioned about it being really naive when I started my first business. And, a few months in, I'm like, what the hell have I done? Um, and then, at one point, the business wasn't going well when we tried to pivot and we couldn't, you know, make it small enough, fast enough. And I think something that's very little spoken of is how difficult it is to close a business, specifically like an agency, right?
Yeah.
Agency is quite easy to start. Well, relatively easy compared to a product, right? Because you need a first customer and then you hire someone to do the work and you work with that person, you do it and you grow, grow, grow. Eventually you have 10 employees, okay? If you have a 10 employee agency, it's practically impossible to close it down. So, so anyway, so I found myself in this thing. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? You can't really close it down. Nobody wants to buy it because it doesn't have a balance sheet. So it generates cash flow, but it needs me, like the founder, to continue to help it to generate cash flow. So, you can't sell it unless you stay. And if you stay and you don't own the shares, do you still want to work there? So it's a very difficult thing to work around. But so at the time, really, at times felt like, oh man, what have I started here? I wish I didn't do it because now I can't get rid of it or close it or do whatever with it. But years later, looking back at it, it was a massive blessing because what you learn building a business is obviously not something you can learn not building a business. Like you learn
Yeah.
doing really complicated things. You learn to operate at a level of intensity and stress, and that that makes you comfortable with that level of stress, and obviously helps your career no matter what you do after that. Um, and really, that experience is worth a ton because
Mm.
when your life depends on it, which is often the case for founders when they're building business, your decision making changes substantially. Like even if I would, as an employee, if a mistake could lead to you losing your job, you could always find
Yeah.
another job, right? But as a founder, there's often more at stake. Like every mistake you make could be not only fatal to the business, but it could bankrupt you. Right.
Yeah.
So the level of effort and thought and insight that you gain, or the level of thought and effort that you put into decision making is substantially more. And because of that, the level of insight and experience you build is substantially more than being an employee. So I think, to answer your question, business blunder is probably starting it, but yeah, what a blessing of what we can learn through it. And yeah, now doing it with all that experience, it is definitely easier.
Yeah, I think on the other side of the coin, you always think about starting a business, but like you say, no one thinks about what it's actually like to close a business because not all startups run for years and years or get to the level of like an Amazon or things like that. They do come to a close at some point in time, and it can be for various reasons. But coming from that, I'm assuming you obviously don't see the business as a failure. It was just something that, had to be closed down. And obviously, you've mentioned a bit about failure as well, talking about creating apps that failed, that didn't go, and then you wonder why you built them. And also having the naivety when you're younger to be able to just go after things and to try and fail and, fail quick, essentially what they say, fail fast.
I think failure is so relative, and I think that's
Mm,
we think of it as obsolete, right? So I mean, I mentioned the company. We were in a position we can't retrench people fast enough. We need to grow, make it smaller. We eventually did a share swap deal, and eventually I managed to sell those shares. So I got an exit out of a situation that didn't look like there was anything there, right? On the one hand, you
mm,
look at it and go, "Oh, it was a failure because you were in that position." But then, if we zoom out a bit and look at the entire timeline, I built a business and I got an exit, right?
yeah.
So it's very relative as to what failure is, because one could have argued it was a failure because the business should have been worth substantially more, but it really isn't. So it really depends on how far you zoom out, what you look for, and what you think is failure.
So, what is your view on failure in general?
Perhaps it's a case of saying, well, the business has rules, right? And I think that's probably the most practical and most useful way to think of it. And the rules of business is that an organization needs to be able to survive, right? And the oxygen in business world is cash flow and
Hmm.
profitability that leads to generating of positive cash flow. And those are the rules. So anything that plays by those rules and don't succeed at surviving is in business world is a failure, right? But
Hmm.
the mistake we make is we sometimes take those rules and that failure and project it onto ourselves in a personal capacity. That's not human failure. Human failure
Yeah.
looks completely different, right? Human failure is probably, sheesh, that's very philosophical question now that I think about it. What is human failure? Um, yeah, that's really hard to define, right? But what I can tell you,
Mm.
in failure and business failure is not the same thing. And as founders, if you can separate those two from each other and say, you know what, for me, human failure, what would it be? It would be giving up on my marriage. It would be,
Mm.
walking away from my kids. It would be not making an effort to look after them. That for me personally would be human failure. For another person, it might
Yeah.
look right. But those three failures I explained for me personally, it's got nothing to do with business. It's got nothing to do with business failure.
Mm.
Like business failure is based on there are rules how these things work, and if you don't manage to, if the business doesn't manage to play by those rules and be successful in surviving, that's a failure, right? But even in that business failure, there's personal accomplishments and achievements and progress through learnings, insights gained,
Mm.
relationships built, um, that is just worth so much that could actually lead in personal success, even though there was business failure. And I think that's where we
Yeah.
separate it. And why is it hard? Well, if you don't make your business personal, I mean, I'm really passionate about my newsletter, right? For me, it's personal.
Yeah.
So if someone
Yeah.
unsubscribes, I take it personally. I've learned to deal with that, but I do take it personally. But and it should be right because if I don't take it personally,
Mm.
I don't value it. But
Yeah.
now, if the newsletter fails, does that mean I fail as a person? No, it's just it wasn't a viable business. And I think that's
Mm.
important to distinguish it like that. But it's hard because it like I said, it should be personal.
Just moving on to the final question before we move on to the quick fire round, but I just wanted to ask, just to bring a little bit of lightheartedness to this all, is what was a cinematic worthy cock up moment for you in your career?
No, I can't think of something now. Oh, here's a lucky story.
There we
So,
go.
we had this agency and we were building mobile apps, and then we're like, cool, we know how to build apps. And then we're like, okay, cool, we're gonna start building our own apps. So, we built this app where it was called Helping Out, and then charities can list things, tasks they want people to do, and people can do it, and they can earn some tokens, and the tokens you can swap for other stuff. Conceptually, a really cool idea, but we were an agency, right? So, and there's a massive difference between someone that really owns a product and makes that work, and to an agency. So we did that. We built another app, which was not a mobile app, but it was like this cool little tool, and this was the best party trick ever. The USSD, right? If anybody still knows what USSD was, but in the old days, you can recharge your cell phone using USSD. I think some people still do. You buy airtime and then you put in the voucher. But we built this really cool thing that you type in a USD code and then someone's cell phone number and hash, and then submit it, and then all of a sudden your phone rings. And as you pick it up, the other person's whose number you enter's phone rings also, and then you're actually doing a phone call with each other, right? But neither of you are paying for the phone call because both of you got called and we connect you with technology in the back, right? Really cool. Only thing is we paid for all of those calls. So we were like
Yeah.
party tricking
I
away.
was just thinking.
We were party tricking away like, are we going to sell ads in this? I'm like, listen, you need to listen to 5 hours worth of advertisements to pay for this call. Like it's never going to work. But we were like running with these things. So we had this app, we built that thing. We built another thing that I think is actually starting, some other people are starting to get it right. But, doctors' waiting rooms, you have to fill in that massive form, right? So we were,
Mm.
let's do this whole thing digital. We tried to convince doctors to use it, and that didn't work. So really like three major investments into building products, realizing that, you know what, it's not build it and you come, or you put out tech and it's nifty and it's cool party trick, but really building from understanding a customer, understanding how a business model could work from the start instead of just building tech
Yeah.
and hoping for the best. Which is also, by the way, one of the reasons why I'm building the newsletter, because first time building something, we built product first. We're like, here's a product, right? And then a lot of people
Hmm.
say second time you build for the customer first. So you talk a lot to customers and you build something. Third time you build an audience first. So we're building an audience first and adding value to them and converting that into a community and then going, okay, cool. How can we now monetize it? How can we now sell products to it that add value, obviously? How can we build community out of this? So yeah, I think hopefully I learned something from those lessons, but yeah, I've spent a lot of money. Um, and none of those things
On
really.
other people's calls.
Yeah, if anybody wants to buy technology where you can make people call for free and you fit the bill, then let me know.
Thanks so much. So now we move on to the quick fire round. So just first thing that pops into your head. First question is that if you could change people's perception in the world about one thing, and it can be anything, what would it be?
Yeah, that hard work is good for you, like I said earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Two, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Build it and they'll come. It's up there. Um, and starting a business is easy.
And three, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Yeah, so the best advice is probably along the lines of understanding, that a business, I mentioned earlier, a business, has these rules, and oxygen for the business is proper
Mm.
cash flow. So, a lot of times we get stuck in ideas and we go, cool, big idea. But, ultimately it comes down to business needs to generate money, and then it can live and grow and be fruitful.
And if you could live in any book, which would it be? Or if you don't read fictional books, what book would you highly recommend?
So I think a book that helped me think completely differently about business is a book called Zero to One by Peter Thiel, and he was part of the PayPal gang back in the day.
Yeah, I've read
Um,
Zero to One as well. Super good. Does make you think differently.
yeah, it doesn't tell you how to build a startup, but it tells you how to think
Yeah.
differently about startups, which is really useful. And I
Yeah.
think it's so applicable for South African founders. So a lot of times you can watch Y Combinator things, and they're great, by the way, but that's how do you build a hyperscaling IPO bound startup in the
Mm.
USA versus, over here it's a bit different. Where Zero to One just helps you think differently, which you can then very practically apply in how you build startup in South Africa.
And five, three people that you would have over for a dinner party, dead, alive, or fictional characters included.
So it's Rugby World Cup time. Um, so
Yes.
I'll go number one, Sia Kolisi. And the reason being, I just love the way he thinks about people and leadership and dynamics. He doesn't go for the obvious, technical answers. He always thinks deeper about things. He has this
Mm.
deep way of connecting with people, and I think that's really awesome. So he would definitely be up there. Um, I'd love to have dinner with Steve Jobs, because I think Steve Jobs was probably 20 years ahead of his time. And what's fascinating is there's a lot a lot about Steve Jobs that makes me think about Elon Musk. Like there's a similarity in absolute
Mm.
opposition about craftsmanship. So, if Steve Jobs is not willing to come back from the dead to do it, then I'll swap him out for Elon Musk. But that would be kind of a similar category for me. Uh, and then I would say, so we've got a sportsman, a businessman, and then we can make it a bit more political. So either Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr. I think that would be fascinating. Also because of the way they think. Like I think sometimes
Mm.
when we look at history, we can go back and say, at that time, oh, this person said that. You can read the speech they said, and in modern context, that speech doesn't seem meaningful. But if you look at
Mm.
the time they were living in, and for them to have the ability to actually think in that way, I think
Yeah.
that was, I'd love to understand what made them think that way. And it's the same with Steve
Yeah.
Jobs as well. He was so ahead of his time. Like, what was different in the way he thought that pioneered so much? And actually, to be honest, all three of them have that characteristic. I think Siya Kolisi is living in a time now where he's pioneering a way of thinking about South Africa, which a lot of people in South Africa are not thinking about.
Yeah.
About bringing everybody together and thinking about the bigger picture in such a genuine and authentic way. I think that's a lot of what we need in this country.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I also always love watching Sia's after, like those media chats and then also what he's just perpetuated online as well. I think this was one of the best things making him captain, and though his leadership is amazing. And
Absolutely.
rugby is just bringing South Africans together. We might hate each other and the government at the moment, but as soon as the book are on, we are all united and we're all such happy supporters.
Absolutely. And no load shedding. Can you imagine?
No load shedding, no problems, nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Renier, for sitting with me today and having this discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nicky.
And I'm sure we'll be in touch in future.
Awesome. Thanks for having
Um,
me. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks. Cheers.